There's a moment that quietly happens in many lives across the United States, and it doesn't look dramatic on the surface. It often begins with doing everything right. You finish school, you get a stable job, your income starts to grow, and slowly your life begins to resemble what most people would call success. You move into a better apartment, maybe finance a car that feels reliable, start paying for conveniences that save time, and over time your lifestyle begins to stabilize into something comfortable. From the outside, it appears like progress, like upward movement, like the system is working exactly as intended. But somewhere along the way, something subtle begins to shift. Despite earning more than you did before, the sense of financial ease doesn't arrive in the way you expected. Instead, expenses expand almost invisibly to match your income, and what once felt like progress starts to feel like maintenance. You are no longer climbing, you are sustaining. And this is where the hidden middle-class trap begins to take shape, not as a sudden collapse, but as a slow and almost imperceptible plateau. The core of this trap is not simply about income and spending, but about how financial structures interact with human psychology. As income rises, expectations adjust alongside it. What once felt optional begins to feel necessary, and what once felt like a luxury becomes reclassified as normal. This shift is rarely intentional. It happens gradually, through repeated exposure and social comparison, until the baseline cost of living quietly resets itself at a higher level. At this stage, many people assume the solution is simply to earn more. And while higher income does provide more flexibility, the underlying system does not change. In fact, in many cases, it becomes more complex. Higher earnings often bring higher fixed costs, larger financial commitments, and a greater sensitivity to disruption. A larger home comes with higher taxes and maintenance. A newer car comes with higher insurance and depreciation. And a more convenient lifestyle often comes with recurring expenses that are easy to overlook individually, but significant when combined. To understand why this becomes a trap, it helps to look at the structure of cash flow rather than just income. Imagine income increasing steadily over time, but fixed expenses rising in parallel. The gap between what you earn and what you keep does not expand as much as expected. Instead, it compresses. And as this margin narrows, financial flexibility decreases, even if total income appears healthy on paper. This is where the mathematics of the middle class becomes particularly important. Financial stability is not determined by income alone, but by the relationship between income, expenses, and time. When a large portion of income is committed to fixed obligations, the ability to adapt becomes limited. A job loss, a medical expense, or an economic shift can create disproportionate stress because there is very little room to absorb change. What makes this system especially persistent is that it is reinforced by social norms. In many environments across the United States, middle-class life follows a predictable pattern. There's an expected sequence of milestones, each associated with a financial upgrade. And while each step individually appears reasonable, together they form a structure that is difficult to step outside of without feeling like you are moving backward. At the same time, the financial system itself is designed to make this progression accessible. Credit allows future income to be used in the present, smoothing the path toward these milestones. Monthly payments replace large upfront costs, making higher levels of consumption feel manageable. But this also means that a portion of future income is already allocated before it is earned, further reducing flexibility over time. There is also a psychological layer that deepens the trap. As people invest more into their current lifestyle, both financially and emotionally, the cost of change increases. Downsizing, reducing expenses, or altering habits can feel like a loss, even if it improves long-term stability.
This creates a form of inertia, where maintaining the current system feels easier than restructuring it, even when the long-term outcome is less favorable. Historically, versions of this pattern have appeared in different forms, but the modern version in the United States is particularly pronounced due to the combination of consumer culture, access to credit, and rising costs in key areas like housing, healthcare, and education. These are not easily adjustable expenses, which means they anchor a large portion of financial life in place. As a result, many individuals find themselves in a position where they're earning more than previous generations at similar stages, yet feeling less secure. This is not necessarily a contradiction, but a reflection of how the system has evolved. The system has shifted from one where income growth alone could significantly improve stability to one where managing the structure of expenses becomes equally important. Breaking out of this trap is not about rejecting the middle-class lifestyle entirely, but about understanding its mechanics. When you begin to see how income, expenses, and psychology interact, the system becomes more transparent. Decisions can then be evaluated not just based on affordability in the present, but on how they affect flexibility in the future. Over time, this awareness leads to a different kind of thinking. Instead of asking how to upgrade lifestyle with each increase in income, the question becomes how to preserve and expand the gap between what is earned and what is committed. This gap represents optionality, the ability to adapt, to invest, to change direction when needed. And in many ways, that shift in perspective is where the real transition happens. The middle-class trap is not defined by a specific income level, but by a pattern of financial behavior that prioritizes stability in the short term at the cost of flexibility in the long term. Once that pattern is visible, it becomes possible to navigate it more deliberately. The system itself does not announce its presence. It does not feel like a trap while you are inside it. It feels like normal life, like progress, like responsibility, and that is precisely why it persists. Not because people fail to work hard or make rational decisions, but because the structure they are operating within quietly shapes those decisions over time. Understanding that structure does not immediately change the outcome, but it does change the level of control. And in a system where most forces are subtle and gradual, even a small increase in awareness can begin to shift the trajectory in a meaningful way. When the goal moves from simply earning more to maintaining flexibility, the entire framework of financial decision-making begins to realign. And while the middle-class trap may remain present, it no longer operates invisibly. It becomes something that can be observed, measured, and gradually adjusted over time. That's where the difference begins, not in a dramatic change, but in a quiet shift in how the system is seen.